guys, today I want to talk with you about A Much Ado About You, a romance novel by Samantha Young, which has been published in 2021. As per usual, we will start this review with a short synopsis, then continue to a non-spoiler review, and finish this video with the spoilers. If you haven't read the book yet, then do not worry. I will make sure to let you know when the spoilers begin. Much Ado About You is a story about a young woman whose life just doesn't seem to click in order. First, she gets stood up and essentially ghosted by her date, and shortly after she gets passed over for a promotion, all while her friends are moving on with their lives. In order to make a change and get a new perspective on life, Evangeline makes a rash decision on quitting her job and temporarily moving to a small village in England. This kind of holiday does not only let Evie to relax and find herself, but also gives her a possibility to become a temporary owner of a small and cozy bookstore called Much Ado About You. Being a bookish person herself, Evie just can't pass on this opportunity for an adventure. Once she gets there, she slips rather quickly into a lovely routine of running the bookstore and spending time with the locals, as well as she catches the eye of a handsome local farmer who is determined to make Evie fall in love with him. But Evie knows better than that. After all, holiday romances never end well. So I got to know about this book a while ago. I found it on one of those silly Valentine's Day's BuzzFeed lists about the romance books you should be reading right now. And that probably should have been my first clue about the general cheesiness of the book. But in the same list, I found The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which was rather entertaining, so I've decided to give it a try. And while it was a super easy read from the very first to the very last page, I could not get rid of an idea that this book would be a perfect script for a shitty Hallmark movie. I mean, it does check all the boxes. First and foremost, the plot is very basic and crazy predictable. A beautiful, smart, and witty woman who, by the way, of course has multiple self-esteem issues that are magically forgotten as the book progresses, swears off men and moves to a small town where everyone knows everyone, where all villagers are wary about the newcomers, especially tourists. However, everyone straight away welcomes our protagonist and falls in love with her, just because. Same happens with our main love interest. It takes just a couple of pages of one-sided conversation, and this kind, handsome, and charming man just knows that there is no one else in this world for him but Evie. Why? Once again, just because. And I'm not even exaggerating here. In a true meet-cute fashion, Evie gets Roanna's dog out of the way of incoming traffic, and as a way to say thank you for saving his dog, Ronnie walks Evie home and asks her out. The whole interaction on the way to Evie's place is painfully awkward. Ronnie is the only one speaking and the only one asking questions, while Evie tries to avoid him as much as possible, as if being polite to another local living in the town would instantly mean that she is breaking her self-imposed ban on men. But anyhow, there is really no need for the characters to actually get to know one another. It's quite obvious that Ron just looked at Evie and knew that he was in love. Nothing that she could do or say would change his mind. Now, I am not saying that it is impossible for the villagers or for our main love interest to quickly form attachments with our protagonist. But when we are talking about a romance novel, which is already so very shallow on the plot, the author could have at least taken the time to show us the main characters getting to know each other, growing closer together, and falling in love. Instead, we get a story where protagonists fall in love from the very first sight and then spend insane amounts of time finding reasons to not be together. Once again, just because. Another thing that I found quite disappointing was that all of the characters in this book were missing any kind of depth. We meet so many locals in the story, and yet pretty much all we get is each of their names, relationship status, or placement in the family tree, and one major issue the character is dealing with. The issue that our main protagonist will have a chance to solve. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that the book is inherently bad. Every book is out there to find its own reader. I do see how others might find this book to be their comfort read. If you feel happiest reading about the things you can predict well in advance, or if you are a sucker for happy endings, then you should consider giving this book a try. For me, however, Much Ado About You was just too boring and too cluttered with cliches to break past the point of a quick afternoon read. And on this note, we will be going into the spoiler territory. So if you haven't read the book yet but plan on doing it, now it's the perfect time for you to stop watching this video. I'll be honest with you. I struggled so very much to write this review. When I sat down ready to share my thoughts about the book, I realized that there is nothing much that can be actually said about it, as there is nothing really interesting that happens in this story. Now let's look at this together. A girl gets disappointed by her Tinder date and by her sexist male boss, and so she lumps all of the men into the same category of being assholes and temporarily moves to a small town across the ocean. Then a girl meets a perfect guy who's everything she ever wanted in a man and who is head over heels for her, but she can't date him because of this whole all men are assholes thing. Then a girl finally lets her guard down, arguably just because she is horny enough now to let go of the whole men are assholes mentality. And just before the book ends, a girl learns that this perfect guy has been lying to her about her age and position in social class, consequently once more proving to her that all men are assholes. A girl overreacts, drops everything, and moves back home just to talk with her mom, who tells her that she is overreacting, and consequently she goes straight back to England and gets engaged to this guy whom she felt betrayed by enough to quit her dream of owning a bookstore and move back to United States. Okay, if anything, I would say that Ron is the saving grace of this book. Samantha Young did nail the idea of positive, charming romantic lead. However, after the first positive impression of him passed, I started to feel disappointed that we didn't get to actually know him on a deeper level. The more I thought about it, the more certain I was that this book would have been much better if we would have gotten to read the story from his point of view. It would have been interesting to get to know more about his life as a son of a baronet. It would have also been interesting to get to know why he felt such a strong need to lie to Evie about his status or about his age. And no, the very first night when you were wasted, you told everyone you would never date a younger man, so I lied, doesn't sound like a reasonable enough explanation to not only lie, but to force the whole town to lie to Evie as well. That's just childish and insecure, and Ronnie doesn't seem to be either one of those things. In addition, if I would have gotten to see Evie through his eyes, then maybe I would have also understood much better why he felt so fast in love with her, even though he was so cautious about being involved with any other woman. What exactly were the qualities of Evie that pushed him to pursue a tourist? Something that he refused to do all the way until now. I mean, I get that she must have been someone truly special for him to be this heartbroken after she left, but I just cannot understand why. Another thing that I believe would have made this book so much better is if the author would have reduced the amount of the subplots. We kept on getting all those boring and superficial side stories about the villagers. We get a girl who is being psychologically abused by her aunt and isn't allowed to grow up and follow her dreams. We get a family feud that's been going on for years, and a love story, aka Romeo and Juliet, between the two people who grew up in those feuding families. We get another young woman who is estranged from her parents due to her being gay and her father being a homophobe. We get a story of the owner of the bookstore who is a widow and unsure about leaving her current life here behind and letting herself to move on. And maybe those stories could be interesting if author would have gone for quality over quantity. I guess the reason for such stories was to show how great Evie is with people and how much she cares about their lives. But honestly, it kind of felt like Samantha Young knew herself how thin the main plot of Evie and Ron is, and how unrealistic it is that two grown-up people who share such a strong attraction towards one another would actually not start dating because of these trivial reasons. So she kept on trying to keep us occupied with the stories of other people instead. In addition to the stories of our protagonists and of the villagers, we also get to know a little bit about Evie's best friend, who weirdly felt almost like the antagonist of the story, and Evie's mom, who is a recovering alcoholic. Now, the dynamic between Evie and her mom would have been quite an interesting thing to explore. If anything, the trust issues Evie could have developed growing up would have been a more substantial of a reason for her to try to avoid any romantic commitment than this self-imposed ban on men just because she got stood up by someone she hasn't even met before. And yet, rather than going deeper into how her mother's addiction affected Evie's relationship with her mom and with other people in her life, this is being used only to stir up some drama in the story. And just a side note, a romance novel by Emily Henry called Beach Read plays with a similar subject matter. The main protagonist's life is heavily influenced by the personal decisions her parents make. And while the book still provides us, the readers, with a fun and meaningful love story, it also incorporates the difficult childhood aspect in a way that doesn't fall flat or seem superficial. So if you are interested in how I think the subplot could have been handled much better in Much Ado About You, then give Beach Read a try. Lastly, the pacing in this book just felt weird. We start the novel with an instant falling in love, then for next 80% of the book, we just follow Evie pushing Ronnie away and solving other people's problems. Then we continue to an out-of-blue sex scene, and then in the last 15% of the book, we squeeze in all of the relationship drama, the breakup, and the reconciliation. Overall, like I've said before, this book felt like a Hallmark movie to me. Like something that you grab to read in an airport while you're waiting for a plane. It does help you to pass the time, but it doesn't pull you in, nor it leaves you with any long-lasting emotions. But that's just my opinion. What about yours?